But if she's, then how? What? Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day. Yesterday I reviewed The Haunt, and today I review The Haunted. Nothing at all to do with each other. I just thought it was an interesting little kind of name coincidence as far as the movies I picked. Was not intentional. This movie honestly kind of confused the hell out of me. I somewhat in content, but not mostly in content. It was mostly in tone, in quality. I really, I'll be honest, I watched this before I watched Haunt, and I've been kind of sitting on this review because I really haven't been able to figure out exactly how to approach it. It was a bizarre experience from a critic standpoint. This movie was directed by David Holroyd, who has only done one full-length motion picture before, and we primarily follow the character of Emily as she becomes a caretaker. This is like her first job, and this is her first night on the first job to be a in-home caretaker, not live-in, but an in-home caretaker for an evening shift of an elderly Alzheimer's patient. She is basically given absolutely no training. She's walked around the house for about 5 minutes, so she's explained, generally what her, here's your CCTV monitor, here's your television, and the dialogue that ensues with her being walked around. At first you would think that, well, this is pretty hackneyed, but then the characters start saying some things that at least give some character weight to the to the situation, to the attitudes that are floating around. The general person that's leading her around is pretty flippant about everything, and even goes so far as to say, here's my house number, do not call it. If he dies at 5 a.m., make the phone call at 9. So as far as her just being kind of half-assed shown around the house and then see ya, okay, you know what, the dialogue actually supports that. But then throughout the course of her first night, she pretty much just wanders around the house. And this is a very, very slow movie. She wanders around the house. She explores the rooms. She walks around without the lights on for Lord knows what reason. And she pretty much kind of starts seeing some weird things as this ghost starts following her and doing creepy things like slamming doors. Meanwhile, the patient that she's supposed to be taking care of is kind of acting a little bit bizarre in his own right, and now she has to manage this night in this house that appears to be haunted while taking care of this elderly person that needs her care. And that's pretty much the gist of the movie. The reason I found this so confusing from a critic's standpoint is because this is, just looking it up on IMDb, it's very polarizing. Most people seem to really hate it, like 1-star reviews across the board. But then there are a few people that really love it. And I wound up in a situation where, typically in a situation like this, I would wind up somewhere in between. And the best way I can really put it is I wound up in a place in between, but not in the way you'd think. It winds up in a place in between insofar as you have white and black paint in the same jar, but they haven't been mixed together yet. I don't think it was okay generally. There were parts of it that I really enjoyed, and there were parts of it that I really didn't enjoy, and I didn't really find a whole lot of middle ground even within myself on this one. So figuring out how to apply scores to it and talk about it was really difficult. Now, as far as the pacing goes, there are movies that are very slow, and purposefully so, that work in service of the story. And for those, I know that it seems a little cheeky, but for those, okay, like a movie like Unbreakable. That's a really slow burn. But that one I would call deliberately paced. Call it pretentious if you want, but I do believe that it is deliberately paced so that the tempo works in service of the story. And then there are some movies that are just slow until they lull you to sleep. And in this one, I found elements of both. I thought that, yes, this was absolutely a slow movie. If you're looking for a roller coaster ride, avoid this one at all costs. But while some aspects of it were doing really well in increasing the tension, which led to some halfway decent jump scares, which I'll get into in a little bit, other parts of it were just putting me to sleep for absolutely no reason. And then getting back to the jump scares, there were some of them that worked really well. And then most of them didn't. Most of them were just cheesy. And honestly, the whole thing, I got to the point where I just could not wrap my head around any other idea than the director was pretty much putting out a bad movie, and he was accidentally throwing in some good movie elements on top of it. For instance, one of the jump scares, I'm going to go ahead and spoil this one. It's just one particular scare, and it's one that set itself up to be a very, very one we've seen a million times, and I saw it coming a million, miles away. But character is standing with the door to the closet open, and the way the camera is framed, you just know that when the door closes, that there will be something behind it. And the way that this jump scare worked was, yes, there was something behind it. But where ordinarily you would, the thing that would be hiding behind it would be kind of off to the edge of the door, away from the wall that it's hinged against, so that as soon as the door closes, boom, you see the thing. In this case, the actor basically was up against the wall where the hinge area was. So as the door's closing, it gets to about well into the halfway mark and you don't see anything. I thought, okay, well, they just set themselves up for some tension. I mean, this was all taking place within the course of just half a second in my brain, but I thought, okay, this was a fake out. And then the door finished closing. I was like, oh, it wasn't a fake out, it was a double fake out. But was that on purpose? To have the actor standing so far against the door that you didn't see it until the door was almost closed? Or was that... I don't know. I really can't say. I'm not in the mind of the director. I wasn't part of the production. I really can't say. But... and this is going to have a pretty significant impact on some of the scores, at least, like the technical. That would earn high marks on the technical. But if I feel like it's an accident... I don't know. And here's where I kind of land with this, is the very end, and I'm not going to spoil this one, but what I will say is that the very end attempts a twist. And it was one of the most unnecessary, hackneyed twists that raised so many more questions than it answered, and looking back on it, has nothing to do, none of the previous movie therein supported it. It felt like it was tacked on at the last second for absolutely no reason other than a little bit of a twist shock value. And for me, I really couldn't get on board with that. And for me, that kind of solidified that any of the elements of this movie that worked, and there were plenty, were accidents. That there was a level of amateurishness from the script level that kind of any technical levels that made this movie work were kind of just there by happenstance as they tried to push out this movie that conceptually from the script probably should not have been made, or at least should have been refined. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here as best as I managed to muddle through them. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And yeah, this is pretty much where I landed with it, taking everything about this movie into account, really hashing it over. I really gave this one a lot of thought because it honestly deserved it as far as me figuring out what was actually rattling around in my head after I finished watching it. But I think the ultimate question is, would I recommend this movie? I would say, landing in the place where I did, I would say no. I would not recommend The Haunted. But if somebody is wanting to do a study of, how some films work, how some films don't, or even just on some level understand what I'm talking about in this review, and you're willing to, kill an hour and a half, then I'm not going to dissuade you from doing that. I just can't really heartily recommend this for anybody that wants to watch a good, scary, thrilling horror movie. So that should about do it for this review of 2018's The Haunted. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and if you want to support me further, my Patreon tip jar and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.